In this segment, I want to share a little bit of information about what f as a number represents. As mentioned in previous YouTube segments, you're going to be conducting f tests, which means you're going to be generating numbers and consulting a table for numbers that are known as f values. So I wanted to create a segment that shared a little bit about what f as a number represents. I will try to keep this as succinct as possible. First and foremost, f as a number, generally speaking, f as a number represents between group variance or between group difference. That's what hopefully given the information that I tried to share about the hypotheses, it's my hope that that's fairly obvious. So that's what f as a number represents. F equals between group variance or difference. That's what you're going to be calculating. That's what you're going to be analyzing. Then I did produce this handout, and we'll continue, and we'll refer to it here. But I will hold it up here if you want to read it, and then I will turn it back towards me so I can read it. So we've already established that f represents between group variance or difference. More specifically, f represents the total or real amount of variance between our groups after we take into consideration the amount of variance that each group individually brings to the table on its own. And I'm going to provide a little drawing to demonstrate that. But that's a very important thing. So if you need to rewind this and watch it a whole bunch, although I will repeat it as well, but if you need to rewind that and watch it a whole bunch, I would recommend doing that, because that's a really important thing to understand. First, starting at the beginning, or at least starting at the beginning of this particular handout, f as a number represents between group variance or between group difference. So we've got, think of it this way, like three groups, right? Mean 1, mean 2, and mean 3. A group of data provided mean 1, a group of data provided mean 2, a group of data provided mean 3. So we've got three groups. And we're going to calculate a number. We're going to calculate a number that's going to represent these three groups together, the difference between these three groups together. So f as a number represents between group variance or between group difference, but more specifically, f represents the total or real or actual, total real or actual amount of variance or difference between the groups after we take into consideration the amount of variance that each group individually brings to the table. And I mentioned earlier that I was going to provide a drawing for you to hopefully demonstrate what we're talking about here. Okay? So envision, if you will, three groups. Okay, three columns, and I'm going to come back to this type of organization of data later. So you've got three columns or three groups, and I just called them generically group 1, group 2, and group 3. And then you've got data in each group. Okay, now I made those numbers up. I just pulled them out of the air. Looking at these three groups, let's look at group 1 first. Group 1. Can you see that there is some variation in group 1? 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Yes, there is variation in group 1. If there wasn't any variation in group 1, all those numbers would be equal. All those numbers would be the same, but all those numbers are not the same. They are different. So we have variation, or more specifically, variance in group 1. Likewise with group 2. Do you see that we have variance or variation in group 2? We sure do. 9, 12, 4, 3, 1. Those numbers are all different. We have variance within group 2. Within. Group 3. Is there variance within group 3? 9, 4, 10, 1, 7. You betcha, all those numbers are not the same. There are differences there. So yeah, we have variation in group 3 as well. Now likewise, even just by eyeballing the data, can you see that these 3 groups are different from one another? Even though it is difficult, it would be difficult to do math in our head real quickly and calculate or even estimate a mean for each group. But can you see that the means for each group, while they might be similar, there will be difference between them? Are these 3 groups of data the same? No. So looking at these data, these 3 groups and this fake data I made up, graphically there are 2 types of variance represented in this drawing. Two types. And they are within group variance. And when data are organized like this, I call the within group variance vertical variance, because it's how the groups differ within themselves, within group variance, vertical variance or vertical variation. So we have within group variance, and then we also have what I refer to as when our data are organized this way. We also have between group variance, right? How the groups differ from one another, between group variance. Group 1 differs from group 2, group 2 differs from group 3, group 1 differs from group 3. So what I want you to glean from this drawing is that there are 2 different types of variance at work here in these data. There is within group variance, how each group varies within itself, and then there is between group variance, the difference between the groups. And what we need to do with ANOVA is to determine the true or real between group variance. This is what that statement means, and I'll read it again and then I'll move on to the next clip. F represents the between group variance or difference. F represents the between group variance or difference. More specifically, F represents the total or real amount of variance between our groups after, very important point here, F represents the total or real amount of variance between our groups after we take into consideration the amount of variance each group individually brings to the table on its own. The amount of variance that each group brings to the table on its own. So we want to know what is the true between group variance, what is the true or real between group variance after we take into consideration the amount of variance that each group brings to the table on its own. Okay, I'm going to cut this and move on to